From the very beginning, Disney's live-action Snow White remake was positioned as a marquee project, one that was supposed to combine the beloved legacy of a 1937 classic with the visual spectacle and social commentary expected of modern blockbuster cinema. The budget was staggering, reportedly exceeding $300 million in production costs alone, not including the separate but equally substantial marketing expenses that come with global film promotion. With so much riding on its success, Disney treated the project like a flagship title meant to revitalize one of its oldest intellectual properties. But instead of delivering a triumphant return to form, the entire venture rapidly descended into chaos. From casting decisions to script rewrites, to internal studio politics and public backlash, the project became the very opposite of what it was meant to be. It wasn't long before reports began emerging that what was happening behind the scenes was not merely complicated, it was completely unmanageable. With the spotlight intensely focused on every move, what should have been a fairy tale revival soon turned into a cautionary tale. And this transformation wasn't just a matter of creative differences or production delays. It was a systemic collapse involving miscommunication, clashing personalities, spiraling costs, and a total failure to control public perception. At the center of this unraveling was one of the film's lead actresses, Rachel Zegler, whose public behavior and behind-the-scenes conduct became a dominant narrative that Disney could neither control nor redirect. As the situation deteriorated and negative headlines piled up, what had been private frustrations within the studio quickly escalated into full-scale damage control. In a move that surprised many across the entertainment industry, it was reported that Rachel Zegler had abruptly left the country. While her destination remained unclear, the timing of her departure aligned almost exactly with a rumored financial demand from Disney. According to insiders, the studio invoked a clause buried deep in her contract, a clause that granted Disney the right to request partial repayment if promotional obligations were not met. This kind of clause is not unheard of, particularly in high-stakes productions with heavy investment in marketing. But the decision to enforce it marked an extraordinary step. It was not just a financial calculation, it was a statement. A message from the studio that it believed Rachel Zegler's conduct had caused tangible harm to the film's prospects. Disney executives allegedly pointed to missed appearances, disruptive behavior during the press tour, and failure to present a unified front with her co-stars, particularly Gal Gadot. The optics were disastrous. Instead of seeing their lead actress engaged in the global promotional push, fans and industry observers alike saw only turmoil. The story of a studio demanding its money back was unprecedented enough, but coupled with Zegler's disappearance from the public eye, it fueled a storm of speculation. Was this a strategic retreat, a legal dodge, or a simple case of emotional exhaustion? No one at Disney officially commented. And so the vacuum of information was quickly filled with rumors, theories, and even more controversy. While early press releases described the pairing of Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot as a bold and inspired casting choice, the reality on set was far more volatile. According to multiple sources who were either directly involved in the production or close to it, the tension between the two stars was apparent from the outset. What began as creative disagreements quickly escalated into personal hostility. The issue, however, was not limited to simple personality clashes. The root of the conflict lay in divergent worldviews, ideological divides that played out not only during script discussions, but also during public appearances. Gal Gadot, whose global experience and comparatively reserved public demeanor helped her maintain a neutral stance, reportedly tried to focus on her role as the evil queen with minimal interference. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler embraced a far more vocal and activist approach, using the promotional period to highlight social and political themes that she believed were central to the film's reinterpretation. This difference in approach did not sit well with everyone, particularly Disney executives who had hoped for synergy and consistency. Instead, they got awkward red carpet moments, uncomfortable press junkets, and a growing sense that the two leads were no longer promoting the same project. On top of that, reports began to surface about disagreements during photo sessions, friction during promotional shoots, and even moments when Zegler walked off set entirely. These were not isolated incidents. They became the norm, not the exception. As the marketing machine for Snow White roared to life, Disney faced a new and unexpected challenge. Rachel Zegler was repeatedly absent. One particularly damaging incident involved an event organized in honor of Gal Gadot. where both actresses were expected to appear together to showcase their solidarity and diffuse growing rumors about conflict. Instead, Zegler declined to attend, citing objections to the political undertones of the event. Whether those objections were sincere or strategic is irrelevant. What mattered was the impact. Her absence sent a powerful and damaging message. Disney, which had carefully orchestrated the event as a public demonstration of unity, was left scrambling to explain why one of its most important stars had chosen not to participate. Industry observers immediately took note, and the speculation intensified. Was this a principled stand, or was it an act of rebellion? Either way, the fallout was swift. Disney's marketing strategy, which depended heavily on promoting the chemistry between Snow White and the Evil Queen, suffered a major blow. Press outlets began focusing less on the film and more on the feud. Fan communities, already skeptical of the film's modern direction, found even more reason to doubt its sincerity. And within the walls of the Disney offices, a sense of panic began to set in as it became clear that their promotional strategy was crumbling. Following the increasingly visible breakdown in communication between the two leads, the production was forced to undertake what insiders described as one of the most expensive and chaotic reshoot periods in recent Disney history. Reshoots are a common part of filmmaking, typically used to refine scenes or address minor inconsistencies. But in the case of Snow White, they became a lifeline, a desperate effort to salvage a film that had spiraled out of control. Whole sequences had to be rewritten. Dialogue was reworked to remove moments of visible discomfort. Certain scenes, originally designed to highlight the dramatic tension between Snow White and the Evil Queen, fell flat due to the lack of chemistry between Zegler and Godot. Editors were reportedly instructed to stitch together performances that felt disconnected and inconsistent. The process was exhausting. Visual effects teams had to revise their work repeatedly. Costume departments were told to keep recreating looks for continuity. The schedule, already tight, became impossible. Behind the scenes, there was a growing awareness that the reshoots were not going to save the project. They were merely going to delay the inevitable reckoning. And every additional day of filming brought new costs, pushing the already massive budget further into the red. The idea that Disney might ask for a refund no longer seemed outlandish. It started to feel like a foregone conclusion. As the production woes mounted and behind-the-scenes drama spilled into the press, the marketing campaign, initially envisioned as a massive, global showcase of Disney's timeless storytelling and modern creative vision, began to unravel. The press materials that had once promised a heartfelt reimagining of an iconic fairy tale were now overshadowed by rumors, rebuttals, and resignation. Instead of excitement, the media narrative became one of skepticism, hostility, and, increasingly, indifference. Disney's traditional marketing strategy, built on selling wonder, magic, and family-friendly appeal, was unable to compete with the much louder story. That of a film in chaos, fronted by two stars who could barely stand to be in the same room. Promotional tours were scaled back or canceled. Talk show appearances were reportedly cut short or altered at the last minute to avoid uncomfortable questions. The fan response was tepid at best. Across major theater chains, advance ticket sales were far below projections. Reports emerged of some theaters selling only a handful of tickets in what should have been high-volume preview windows. Industry analysts began downgrading box office forecasts in real time. The longer Disney remained silent on the internal conflict, the more the public assumed the worst. The film's message, whatever it was originally meant to be, became irrelevant. What the audience saw was a brand struggling to control its image, a company that had invested millions in a product that now looked unsalvageable. In an industry where image is everything, even the most trivial disagreements can become magnified into full-blown narratives. And in the case of Snow White, the feud between Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot reportedly extended far beyond ideological differences or promotional duties. Insiders began to speak of petty disputes, arguments about who received top billing on posters and trailers, complaints about trailer sizes, costume preferences, and who received preferential treatment from production staff. While these matters may seem inconsequential, they contributed significantly to the toxic atmosphere on set. In a high-stakes environment like a Disney tentpole production, where expectations are impossibly high and scrutiny is relentless, even small irritations can fester into lasting resentment. Colleagues began to choose sides. Communication between departments reportedly broke down. What was supposed to be a collaborative artistic process became a war of egos. The level of dysfunction reached a point where even those who had remained neutral felt the effects. Some sources described days on set where entire sequences were postponed because neither lead would agree to compromise. These incidents didn't just affect morale, they disrupted the entire production schedule and forced reshoots that were both logistically and financially crippling. In the broader context, these petty rivalries illustrated a more profound problem: the lack of unified vision and leadership. Without a clear direction, and with its stars in open conflict, Snow White became less about storytelling and more about survival. While Rachel Zegler's actions and statements captured most of the headlines, Gal Gadot's response to the growing crisis revealed a different kind of breakdown, one characterized not by confrontation, but by retreat. As the controversy deepened, Gadot reportedly began to distance herself from the production's drama, opting to fulfill her obligations with a minimal presence and a clear desire to avoid further entanglement. Her role as the evil queen had initially been touted as a bold reinterpretation of a legendary Disney villain, and in earlier interviews, she had expressed genuine excitement about adding layers of complexity to the character. But by the final stages of post-production, she had become almost completely detached from the promotional machine. According to those close to the situation, Gadot was exhausted by the constant media scrutiny and frustrated by being dragged into conflicts she did not start and could not resolve. She reportedly began refusing joint interviews with Zegler, and her team worked to reduce her visibility in the press circuits. At red carpet events, she appeared alone or with minor cast members, no longer projecting the image of harmony that Disney desperately wanted to maintain. This quiet withdrawal was not interpreted as apathy, but rather as a professional attempting to limit further damage to her reputation. Yet, even this low-profile strategy did not prevent her from being associated with the broader failure. As the only remaining face of the film's promotional campaign, Gadot was left carrying the burden of a film weighed down by problems well beyond her control. Faced with what appeared to be an inevitable collapse, Disney reportedly explored every remaining option to either salvage the film or contain the damage. Executives looked at scaling back promotional expenditures to avoid pouring more resources into a campaign that was no longer working. There were conversations, according to industry insiders, about redirecting focus away from the leads and emphasizing the film's visual effects, supporting cast and soundtrack instead. There were even discussions about bypassing the traditional theatrical release window and pivoting to a faster release on Disney+, not because they believed the film would perform better there, but simply to escape the relentless headlines. Meanwhile, the industry began to take notice. Other studios, seeing the scale of the fallout, reportedly became wary of casting Rachel Zegler in upcoming major roles. The concern was not necessarily her talent, which had been praised in previous projects, but her public image and the potential for conflict. Ziegler's defenders argued that she had been unfairly targeted and that her actions were rooted in sincere personal convictions. But in an industry that values predictability and control, her unpredictability became a liability. At the same time, Disney itself came under scrutiny for failing to manage the situation earlier. Critics argued that the studio had allowed tensions to escalate unchecked and failed to insulate the creative process from political and personal disputes. What had started as a bold reimagining of a classic film had become a textbook example of how not to handle high-profile productions. The original Snow White film, released in 1937, represented the dawn of a new era in animation and storytelling. It was a landmark achievement that captured the imaginations of audiences around the world. The 2025 live-action adaptation was supposed to do the same, updated for a modern audience but still grounded in the themes of love, friendship, and resilience. Instead, the project now exists as a symbol of failure. Not just a creative failure or a financial one, but a failure of leadership, vision, and accountability. The public's attention is no longer on the costumes, the songs, or the reimagined narrative. Instead, it's focused on demands for refunds, missing actresses, ideological disputes, and a studio that seems unable to control its most valuable assets. Rachel Zegler's rumored departure from the country, if true, may have been her attempt to escape the scrutiny and delay the fallout. But it also cemented the perception that something had gone deeply, irreversibly wrong. Gal Gadot, still attached to the project, finds herself isolated, expected to promote a film whose core message has been buried beneath months of controversy. The production team, the editors, the composers, the designers, all those who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, are left in the shadows of a disaster not of their making. For audiences, the choice now is whether they can separate the art from the turmoil. Can they still find magic in a film so engulfed by negativity? For Disney, the lesson is painfully clear. In the modern era, no amount of budget or brand recognition can save a film when its foundation is compromised from within. The Snow White remake, intended to celebrate legacy, may instead be remembered as a sobering reminder of how fragile that legacy truly is.